Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Sprinklebeard, and today we're going to be evaluating the epic Ardeath, Soul Reaping Vanguard. So, Ardeath here is a defender, however, he's also a magic damage defender. This does matter a bit because there is going to be certain content that you get into where you don't want to be doing like normal damage, you want to be doing magic damage. And then specifically, he actually can hit multiple enemies at the same time. So we have a multi-damaging attack from a magic damage dealer that also can tank for us. So let's look into his kit and see what we have going on here. So when it comes to Ardeath, because he is a magic damage dealer, his stats are not going to be like the highest of the highs. So he has a very respectable defensive stat of 3,100. This is kind of very normal for a lot of our epic defenders. His HP is slightly on the lower side though, being at 2,200. I believe a lot of the other epics are closer to like 25 or 28, if I remember correctly. His cost is 18, makes him perfect as a defender. It's not too expensive. It's slightly higher than like Rex if we want to use him as a baseline. But your block is 3, so no change there. His attack interval is slow at 3. A lot of the defenders tend to have a slightly better attack speed than normal. They're usually around like 2.4, so him having a slower attack speed does give a small amount of pause to him. When it comes to his skills, so first off, he deals 100% damage to 3 enemies. Now, we've talked about this before, that when it comes to our defenders, we're not necessarily depending on them as to be a giant damage-dealing source for us. However, every champion in this game does have a unique role that they can fill. They have something that they bring to the table that probably a different champion does not bring. So Ardeath being a magic damage dealer that can hit up to 3 enemies does actually give him some interesting usefulness. This could also let him knock out certain enemies, or as he's blocking, he's not just hitting the one target, he's hitting a whole bunch of the, little minions as they're walking up. And if you get him to the point where he is able to do enough damage, I don't necessarily think I would encourage you to build damage on him. But if you built him up for damage, or like as a backup stat for him, right? So if we did the normal HP and defense percentages, and then if you worked on things like attack percentage or crit rate and blah, 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 the fact that he could be knocking out 3 targets. Or in the early stages of the game, right? When you're first starting to play, having a tank that can also deal damage to 3 units is incredibly useful during your leveling up process. We're going to go straight into his ultimate because his passive does work with his ultimate like a bunch of our champions. So activates Realm of Curse. Additionally, the hero becomes unable to perform basic attacks during this time, but his max HP is increased by 50%. This effect lasts for 8 seconds. Realm of Curse deals damage equal to 3% of the caster's HP to enemies in range per second. So for those of you who are not familiar with this like per second concept in this game, it is a very fast ticking thing. There are certain champions in the game that hit every like 0.5 seconds, and I think there's even one that hits 0.3 seconds. It's phenomenally fast. But this damage per second, it does feel very good, especially with him having that slow attack speed of once every 3 seconds attacking. Now him doing damage every second to the enemies in range is fantastic. So in addition to this, so your rage cost is 800. So as we level this up, the skill cost goes down. His initial rage, so like what he starts off with, goes from 100 to 200. His max HP goes up. His damage goes up by 1%. So instead of that Realm of Curse doing 3%, it's doing 4%, scaling up to 5%. The skill cost is going to scale down from 800 down as low as 600. And then the max HP he gets, it goes from 50% to 70%. Now, it doesn't say that like the max HP only lasts until the end of his ultimate. I would take that as a you understood thing that yes, it goes away at the end of his ultimate. So right now he's just looking like an AoE magic dealer that happens to be a tank. So, you know, good and useful, but not amazing. But it's when we get to his life-taking passive. The Realm of Curse also inflicts a vulnerability for magic damage. It starts off at a base of 10% on all enemies in it and restores HP to the hero equal to 10% of the enemy's damage taken from the Realm of Curse. So if you're hitting all the enemies for that 3% damage, as you hit enemies 3 times, you would be gaining back roughly 10% of that damage. So here, the HP recovery based on damage dealt does increase from 10%. It scales up to a total of 20%. And then the target's magic damage taken, so the magic vulnerability, does scale up from 10% to 15%. This might not sound super amazing, but again, this is one of those things where it might free open a slot for you. Rather than you always playing with somebody like Mary or Aeon that we recently reviewed, this gives you the chance to have a defender that puts on this magic vulnerability. There's certain other champions that can do similar things. So we don't have Jean Car on this account, but Jean Car gets a bonus that as he blocks a target, he then gives them a magic vulnerability of 30%, which is just absolutely very, very high. Here, we could have things like Ardeath and champions like Greed synergizing together, where Greed can lower the actual magic resistance of the enemy, and then Ardeath being able to block things, and when he ults, causing them to take more magic damage is always a good thing. And this even helps his own ultimate, because it is doing magic damage to enemies. Has some very good synergy here. So, absolutely like what he brings to the table. Awakenings. So, each basic attack launched has a 20% chance of restoring 3% of his max HP. This will help a bit with his longevity. I do like that it's 20%. So, every couple of attacks, every 5 attacks, you should be gaining back some HP. This also means that things that give attack speed to everybody else, or any attack speed on him, could also be a useful stat. So if you're looking for his defensive abilities and for his longevity, you might increase his attack speed. His Awakening 2 is just 750 HP. Again, useful. We always like HP on our tanks. I do wish it was a little bit higher, in line with some of the other epics getting the 1200. Or I wish that like Awakening 2s were 750 and then Awakening 4s were 1200. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. We like more HP on them though. Damage dealt with the Realm of Curse increases by 20% against enemies with less than 50% HP. So he basically gets an execution on his damage. And here they say Realm of Curse. It's his ultimate. It's the... Oh, it is Realm of Curse. I thought it was like Realm of Chaos. I'm not paying attention this morning. No caffeine is making things hard for me today. But yes, during his Realm of Curse, he now gets execution damage on it. Meaning he gains extra damage when your enemy is at lower HP. So that feels phenomenal. Rage Regen. Rage Regen is always good because this lets our tanks, or our tanks, our healers, get to their ultimate sooner, and the sooner they get to it, the more impactful that they can feel in most content. Lastly, inflicts a stun on enemies when they enter the Realm of Curse for the first time. This stun is actually going to be a super amazing thing when we talk about his synergy with other champions. Now, by no means do I feel like Ardeath is going to be a super savior on your account. I think for newer players, he's going to feel absolutely phenomenal. Looks department, he's got a very, very cool look going on. Him being an AoE magic dealer, I think is going to be very advantageous for your newer players. I will say, though, I don't feel like he scales well into the later portions of the game. And what I mean by that is that as our accounts get more defined, we have damage dealers that we want to be damage dealers. We have our tanks that we want them to be tanks. We're not really depending on them for their magic damage. Now, that being said, it's not bad for us to have magic damage in addition to him being a tank. It just makes it harder for us to have that moment where, know what I really need? I need a tank that deals magic damage and increases magic vulnerability. Yes, the perfect storm is all helpful, but admittedly, it's not something like a lot of times when we talk about tanks, we think about the top tier tanks that are good in almost 99% of situations. And the one situation that they're not good in, I hate to say this, I highly doubt Ardeath is going to be the tank that is good in that situation. So, very cool design champion, very cool aesthetic, but we do have some issues there. Now, the reason I mentioned that the Awakening 5 of him stunning something is so valuable. So he is part of the esoteric, not cultist. So I am mistaken. I am mistaken. I was going to say that synergies is really great with the CC mechanics of the cultist. That's not what we needed. The lords for the esoteric here reduces faction ally skill cost, so that's the cost of their ultimates, by 15%. So this lets him get into his ultimate faster, and then obviously the increased attribute bonuses are always a good thing. I could certainly use Raiden on my account to buff up my combat. It would be phenomenal to get a lord like him. But yeah, very useful, very useful. Let's talk about next where we feel like Ardeath would be most useful. So where Ardeath is most useful at, we have things like the campaign where we've done this with other tanks. Wherever you need a tank, Ardeath is going to be valuable. Because he does magic damage, there's going to be small nuance to where he's going to be great at, but kind of like our other tanks. Wherever you need a tank, wherever you need a big bulky boy that does not die quickly and can block units, he's going to be phenomenal. So in the campaign, I absolutely see him being super amazing in the campaign, because most players playing in the campaign are newer players. It is one of those things that unfortunately once we beat the campaign, majority of us don't go back. There's not like recurring awards there. There's not extra items or a very specific thing that we farm for in the campaign. So most of us just don't go back. And the Void Rift, there's a bunch of enemies that specifically target just your defenders. So by having a defender that you can throw out, otherwise they'll target everything on your side of the field. For that reason, he will feel very good here. Him not having extra defenses though, him being more of an offensive tank, might make him a little bit more difficult to use. However, there are enemies that are big, gigantic damage dealers that are weak to magic. For that reason, Ardeath could be more valuable than your other tanks as long as he can tank the damage. When it comes to the arena, it's not very often that we need a tank in any of these. Maybe as you are a newer player, there are things like the single target arena or the sustained damage arena. I could see those being the two places that he could shine a little bit better. But admittedly, I would also argue you'd want to build him more on the offensive side of things, and then still have a healer to make sure that he doesn't die quickly. So he'd kind of become a magic damage bruiser. But because of that as well, I would argue you might just want to have a magic damage dealer, not necessarily a bruiser. But he does have a place there for sure. So when it comes to our raids, I've recently gotten feedback that people think that I spend too much time talking about these, because most of the players that watch these reviews, you actively play the game, so you're familiar. So to quickly go over things. In the Marksman, no, he has no business being here, not even for synergy, only for experience. For mages, this is definitely a strong place for him. Him being a defender lets him defend the crystal, also lets him deal magic damage, which everything in there is weak to magic damage. In the endurance, him having abilities to give himself back HP is very useful. So yes, you could absolutely use him here. And in the melee attack, same thing. As we get further up, we lose platforms, so our ground units become more powerful. Him being able to hit 3 enemies at the same time should give him a very big advantage, and the fact that he's a defender will also help slow things down for champions like Ein or some of your other damage dealers for them to take the most effect. This is definitely where building him for damage could feel better as well. For things like Guild Boss, I don't think this is the best place for him at all. Yes, he's a magic damage dealer, but he's also a defender. He's not going to be putting out the most magic damage. So ideally, no, I would not really encourage bringing him here. In the Artifact Material raid, I think this is a good place for him. Him doing magic damage, as well as being a defender. There gets a point where you need to just stop the minions from reaching the boss. I don't remember the boss's name. It was Salazar. They recently changed it. But a concept that you can have is just to isolate the boss. So the boss would fight your main tank, not Ardeath in this case. Ardeath would be fine, but not Ardeath. But you might want to have defenders on the outside just holding off the other bugs and stuff from coming in. And then that way your fight can remain private. You can just have tons of damage dealers in there wailing on the boss and not having to worry about defending off the bugs. I foresee Ardeath being very valuable there. Hey, Sprinks. In Tide. Tide is a place where I could see Ardeath being really good, especially not only as a tank, where he's blocking 3 units, but also his ability to damage multiple units. And that realm of Curse would also be damaging everything in that zone. I could actually see Tide being an amazing place for him to shine. And that's somewhere where I could very easily argue, just build him full damage and let your Tide bonuses give him his tanky stats. In our resource raid, this is one of the places that we always show off of our champions. Oh, bloody. Brah. I need space. So. Game, let me play. I just want to show off Ardeath. So in this example video here, I do not have Ardeath. I have him at 5-star because I was slowly upgrading all the epics on my account. However, I have not given him all of his promotions yet. So again, anywhere where we need a tank is going to be valuable. There's not going to be any harm in that specifically. So here I have him in full tank gear, and as we can see, he's doing very respectable damage. There's nothing bad about what he's bringing to the table. Okay, good. I was about to say, I don't think I have gear on him. But as we can see, him doing magic damage, the scaling for it is really good. So I could see, right now he's in full tank gear. I could foresee him potentially being a bit better than what we think for damage specifically, being like an AoE damager that is also just a tank as well. So here would be Realm of Curse. So during this, again, he's not allowed to attack. However, as we see, he's just ticking away at everybody in that Realm of Curse. He would also be increasing the magic damage that they would be taking during that time. I will admit that does not feel like it lasts very long. At 8 seconds, it feels very short. So a lot of the times I think that majority of players are going to be using him in the faction trials, and potentially only the faction trials. Again, I think he's a very good champion in the earlier stages where we need damage on our account, and he would be one of the most offensive tanks that I could see. In Gear Raids, in Gear Raid 1, I think this is going to be probably his best home. There is a small argument for Gear Raid 2, certainly not Gear Raid 3 for nearly any reason. But in Gear Raid 1, everything here is weak to magic damage. So him not only hitting multiple targets, but that area of effect on his ultimate, then also encouraging magic damage. A lot of good synergies there. So absolutely perfectly fine to bring in Gear Raid 1. Gear Raid 2, we have these charging like rock people that come running down the field. So your defenders are going to be very valuable here. They are also weak to magic damage. So here I could argue he's going to feel a little bit better. However, the enemies aren't frequent enough that he's constantly going to be attacking for him to heal himself up. So I wouldn't depend on like him doing like crazy numbers or crazy sustain. It's just that the way his kit's designed. He's a tank, so he'll deal better on this level, and he deals magic damage, which for half the enemies is going to feel better most of the time. In our faction trials, so in the basic trial, as well as he is an esoteric, as I look at the wrong symbol, he's an esoteric. Both of these I do think he's plenty good in. In the esoterics, it's a little bit more difficult because the enemies scale up super quickly because they want to show you your mages being super powerful against these giant, bulky, slow-moving monstrosities. So here is in the esoteric specifically, I feel like he's not going to shine as much as he could. However, he might also just need proper gear so that he can tank well enough. But the whole point of these levels is you're meant to get overwhelmed by the giant monstrosities. So it's kind of hard to say, hey, let's have this offensive tank try to tank some of the highest damage in the game reliably. So I'll have to do some future testing, but I do need, like, unfortunately, I'm at a point where a lot of my faction trials, I just need to promote things to 6-star just for faction trials. Like, that's where my account is. So unfortunately, the levels where he could have been really great for me, I didn't have him for, and now I'm past them, and it's like, yes, I kind of need a tank, but he's also not living long enough. I almost need just more damage at this point. For the basic trial, though, a lot of the enemies in here are weak to mages, and although he is not considered a mage, the game might consider him a mage as terms of magic damage. Typically the mages are your platform champions, not your grounded units. However, him being a defender and him doing magic damage has super good synergy in the basic trial and makes him very useful to use pretty much everywhere in there. So real quick here, I do want to see if Ardeath with some of my better tank gear. I don't see him. Not you four. Not you guys. Where is he? There he is. I do want to see how much he can tank when it comes to this boss. And the biggest reason behind that is that he's a tank. We need to show off what he is capable of. Now, at 5-star specifically here, I don't expect him to be amazing. And he's also not promoted enough that I expect him to be an amazing tank here. However, as we're seeing in full tank gear, and this is the hardest difficulty for Artifact Material Raid, he's actually tanking just fine. I am thoroughly impressed. I expected this to be a lot more difficult, to be honest. But yeah, unfortunately here, I don't have any other magic damage dealing champions to have this look specifically better. But very impressive, Ardeath. I am a fan. But here we can see the health just melting away as we get out our units. But during the ultimate, that was about like 5% of the boss's max HP. So that absolutely feels great. I'm really happy that gets to show off Ardeath being plenty tanky, because that is exactly what we want from him. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for Ardeath. Do I have any Ardeath fans out there? I think he looks super awesome. And whenever I see things like this, like dealing damage to 3 enemies, I always get really intrigued, because majority of the time, it's very rare that we get levels where you're getting like overly swarmed by things, and the levels like Tide or like Gear Raid 1 where you are getting overly swarmed, hitting up to 3 enemies is a very, very valuable thing. So I'd be very curious to know if anybody is actually like actively using him, and if he's like super badass in actuality, because right now I just have him in a whole bunch of defensive gear. I would like to see how his damage looks by giving him offensive gear, but that's not the purpose of this specific video. I have done it for other tanks like Titus, but Titus also had a very specific reason for making him look ridiculous. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to join us over at twitch.tv/sprinklebeard, we stream every day, Sunday through Wednesday, as long as I'm not working overtime and have to pick up extra hours and my sleep schedule gets messed up. That's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching, but until that next time, ta-ta.